Hey, hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome to Where's Your Heart? You already know what time it is. This is where we champion vulnerability as core human strength. We thank all of our viewers, all of our listeners for chiming in. Always grateful to have everyone here on Monday. So we're going to kind of fade in. Instead of fading to black, we're going to fade directly in. You're hearing the voice of Torian Richardson at Torian Online. And of course, we have the almighty co-host, the Royce, in the building, in the place
What are
to
you
be.
doing? What are you
I'm trying to
doing?
set you up, man. I'm setting you up. I'm setting you up. Setting you up. Setting you up. You know. We
Dude,
have
we have captions and they're working.
we do have captions and they're working. Yes,
I, I,
yes,
I'm just sharing it to social media. If you're tuning in, please go share it to social media and
yes.
celebrate the captions.
Yes, we definitely want to create a better experience. So we're in the process of making a few changes to the show, of adding some production, which we're going to touch on a little bit later. We're just making it more of a programmatic approach and making it a little bit more entertaining for our consistent viewers and things. So we really appreciate all of the viewers, all the listeners that we have. So we're going to ask you right now to take this opportunity to share with anyone who you think needs to hear a message that is centered around vulnerability as a core human strength. We didn't announce today's show because we are actually returning to a topic that we had a few weeks ago, and we want to make sure that we hold the space in a way that we know how. So we're going to be talking about some things that are going to be great, but it doesn't really matter because you know how we get down on the show. So please make sure that you share. Um, and that's it, man. I think that's enough for the Torian commercial that I have every week. How you feeling today, bro?
Dude, all right, so I'll put this out there. I'm fucking lit about the book. I'm at 34,000 words.
Okay.
My goal was to hit 40. I'm going to hit that this week.
Okay.
Uh, But the problem is I'm like so excited, but like then I was talking with some friends yesterday and they like doubled the number of topics that I wanted to cover just by talking with them. And I was like, shit, no, I gotta cover that. Shit, no, I gotta cover that. So like so I'm gonna hit my word goal this week, but it
Mhm.
now is irrelevant because the bigger issue is how do I cover all these topics. So anyway, it's really good, but like I'm grateful for friends that I can bounce this stuff off of. I'm grateful for friends that hold me to my best self while I'm doing it. Um, and grateful for friends that even though like when I said, so here's my topic list in the book, and I was
Mhm.
all excited and proud because I only had like 3 left, figured I
Right.
timed it perfectly.
Right.
And they're like, yeah, you got a lot of them, but you're missing some. And they started just like throwing him out there. And I was like, oh God, how did I miss that? Oh God, how did I miss that? So it was like, just grateful for friends who both like are in relationship and in the flow and can like call stuff out without malice and without
Yeah.
like judging me for missing the shit that I was missing.
Mm.
You know what I mean?
I
Like,
do. I do. I
yeah,
do. I know exactly what you're saying. Just having that type of support, that type of openness, that kind of candor,
yeah.
but then also be able to hold that space to have some grace within all of that too. It's I appreciate that a lot myself. So
Yeah.
I understand exactly what you're saying.
And you nailed it. I hadn't like consciously said it, but I felt supported. Like,
Support.
yeah. Um that those gaps,
Yeah.
like to have gone and finished the book, quote unquote, having those gaps in it would not have been good, for me either. So,
Well, that's what
yeah,
we want ultimately in our relationships, right? We want the ability to be able to do things like that and
yep,
have that type of interaction, that type of exchange. So I'm with you 100%, man. I
yeah,
understand.
yeah.
So we have a few people chiming in, and we also want to make sure that we can see this. So I
I
have
can't see it
you
still.
can't see?
Darn it. I
No.
cannot
Okay.
see
So
him.
I got we have Aurelia Swan, my cousin, chiming in. What's up, Aurelia?
There
Appreciate
she
it so
is.
much for chiming in. If you get a chance, make sure that you check her out. She's a fashion blogger, good people, amazing human being. I mean,
Awesome.
we share blood, so I got to big up her. But I mean, even without us sharing the same blood, good people. So make sure you check her out, man. She's doing her thing. We'll get some of that out to on our page so you can get a chance to connect with her as well. So you said you can't see it, huh? So I messed that up.
I can't. No, it's been gone for the last week. Who knows? It might have been an
Okay.
update where they flipped switches. Zoom did that to me recently. Now I have to like admit people normally. Like I can't just turn the waiting room off and have them jump right into my things. I'm like, ah. Look, y'all, you fucked with my habits enough just by having me have to do operate this way for COVID. But now you're changing shit on me constantly. So anyway, I don't know.
Well,
But I
and
can't see the coming. It's up
I
to
would
you though.
imagine. So I'll try to make sure I'm very intentional in chiming in and putting things on the screen.
Yeah.
But you have to think from their standpoint too. You have remote work, you have remote learning.
Yep.
I mean, there's so many things that are happening right now. So if you start to apply Moore's law and the level of fluidity that's needed for these times, I could understand, how things could change within a week and then it can kind of change the format. That and I'm not a
Yeah.
producer either, so I'm learning as I go as well. So I probably didn't do enough due diligence before we got on the show, but it's all good. We're doing the best that we can and we want to make the best experience that we can
It's
for
true.
everyone. So
Yep.
yeah, man. Yeah, 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 yeah. So for
So
me,
what are you grateful for? Yeah.
oh boy, gratitude. What am I grateful for? Grateful for a lot of things. I'm trying to be so I've had a lot of conversations over the past few weeks and I guess I'm grateful for readiness and awareness around it. Because what I'm
Say
finding
more.
right well, so what I'm finding right now in talking to different people, talking to and or working with certain organizations is of course there's a dialogue with a lot of organizations around, hey, we're ready to address a lot of different issues. So we'll talk about like diversity and inclusion and things of that nature. Um, but then what I've also found is as I've had some deeper conversations and we really talk about, well, what does that actually mean? Like, what does the word diversity mean to your
Hmm.
organization? And you
Yep.
start to dig in a little bit, you find that it's kind of like, hey, we just kind of took the dictionary definition and just kind of plopped it in the middle of our organization, which I would say is not only misleading, but it can really not connect to who the organization is or the values of the organization
Yep.
and or people. So just being able to acknowledge levels of readiness and what things actually mean, I think is really important. So I'm grateful for that because I've had some conversations that have been a little bit scratchy for some, but then also reaffirming for others. And really being able to talk about, hey, this is what this means to us, and here's how we're actually going to move forward and apply some of these things in how we actually operate and make decisions. So I'm grateful for readiness, my own readiness, but then also just from the conversations that I've had. So that's probably a different one than normal, but this week has been pretty intensive around what does this look like, not only as we start to transition into or after the election, but we're starting to get into the new normal of 2021 for people personally and
Yeah.
organizationally. So readiness is I'm very very grateful for that.
How are you feeling personally on all that? Like the last couple of weeks, I've heard you mention like feeling like you don't know what's next sometimes. And you're a guy who's like you can picture what's next and what's after that and like 25 miles down the road, where you like that's
I try to have some level of foresight. I mean, I don't know if that's good or bad or even right or wrong, but I do try to have some of that. How do I feel about it? I'm excited. I'm excited for a lot of different reasons. The main reason is that I think that a lot of times with change, it takes a certain level of being uncomfortable and getting out of the comfort zone to actually
Yeah.
not only change for the sake of change, but to actually grow and move exponentially in a certain direction. So I'm excited about that because there are conversations like, part of the conversation we're going to have today that haven't been had and or haven't been had with the level of depth in which they're being had right now. Whether people
Yeah.
agree with them or not, it doesn't really matter. But just having the conversation around it, and I enjoy. I mean, I've lived a whole life of moving into the unknown, so I'm all about that life now. But what happens is people want certainty, right? So a lot of what do? We look
Yeah.
for the past to kind of be a marker for the future. Which, when I'm speaking with people in or organizations, I talk about, we're expecting different results, but we're thinking that we're going to use the same units of measure to get different results when we have
Yeah.
evidence or we don't have any evidence at all that it hasn't worked over the past 10, 15, or 20 years. So there's a bit of a dissonance, but I think that's an opportunity for those who are open for it and really able to hold space to have those kind of conversations where people feel comfortable in talking about it. So
You're not
that's
gonna
what
get anywhere good staring in the rearview mirror.
I agree.
Like
Look, listen, I agree 100%. But here's the thing:
Like you got to check that shit every now and then, but but staring at it ain't gonna get you anywhere.
but if we're speaking about, let's just say, organization or business
Yeah.
leaders, right? I mean, metrics,
Hmm.
KPIs. I mean, these check marks. These are the things that organizational leaders are looking for, and we should have them. But how we get to that point and what makes them up is always my
Yep.
question. Like, and just specifically, if we're talking about the conversation around diversity and inclusion, if you don't have a specifically defined definition of what that means to the organization, I think that's the first place to start, right? I mean, it's the baseline.
And having it be authentic. Like your note on that, like how how can you say we connect from where we are now? But that may not be where we are in 5 years, but as an organization, we connect to diversity this way right now.
Hmm.
And we're committing to checking up on that next year to see how that's changed or
Right,
next quarter or whatever.
right.
But yeah, that's part of the problem is we're trying to get it quote unquote right and not have to touch it again. That's not how you unfuck this system.
Hmm.
This is going to take daily habit change on the part of not just the leaders, although I mean they're important, but on the part and buy-in all the way up and down. Like, because that's a massive shift.
Well, it's a huge shift, but I always peel it back to even more than that, and I think this will be a good conversation to have with Eric. I kind of gave away our guest, but to have with Eric as well because we talked a little bit about this last week. But like, why are we doing this? That's the real question for me.
Mhm.
Like, why is this important? Because
Yeah.
I may think it's important in one way, and then we use a word that can have very different meanings or a title for a position. And if we haven't really defined what that means to us and how we operationalize it and connect it to business outcomes or just outcomes in general, then the foundation of it can be kind of wishy-washy. And we've seen this happen in the past, 24, 36 months out. Things sway, economies change,
Yep.
businesses shift as they should and they do. And then, it's no longer ingrained in who we say we really are. So
Also, I
that's it.
want a different word than diversity. Diversity shares a root with divide.
I, Listen, I just had this conversation today. No, seriously, and I don't think it was
Yeah.
taken very well, to be candid. But the it's one of the reasons why I don't lead with it because
Yep.
division is a part of the word. I mean,
Yep.
diversity means there's a divergence, but I also understand it for those people groups that need to have a place in which they can identify. Like I understand that 100%.
Oh yeah.
The
Yeah.
question is how do you not get lost in the silos of that identity, right? How do you
Yeah.
identify it and you make connections, but then you find better, deeper ways to make connections with people who identify in different ways. So that's the hard part. But
Yep.
here's the challenge organizationally, and then we'll move forward. Is that leaders are really pressed right now to have answers and show results.
Oh, well,
And
they're really
well,
pressed to get to do something differently is what I'm excited about, honestly.
I don't know if it's do something differently. I
You
think it's
don't
to
think
do
so?
something. Well, it can
Oh,
be,
okay.
right?
I
I don't
gotcha.
like generalities, right? I mean, some places it is, some places it isn't. But for a lot of places, I think that there's more of an impetus for do something. Like we want to see
Yeah.
something, we want to see results. And again, if we can't say, well, why are we doing this?
Yep.
Are we doing it because it's the hot thing right now? So anyway, not going to spin on this too much because I'm sure we'll be able to touch it with our guests. I do want to give some shout outs to some of the people that we definitely have that chime in. Of course, we have I can't even say his name. Gerard Legrone, my brother, always checking in, always a friend of the show. Thank you, my brother. Appreciate it. And
Sonny!
what? Sonny is in the building with comments. What happens though, when organizations or people say they are ready, then they're not really ready. For
Mhm.
instance, pastors can be hired to bring diversity and inclusion, then the congregation is not really ready, then to force the pastor to give an opinion to just blend into the status quo.
Yep.
Yes, 100%
Yeah,
correct.
and, our classmate, the 2 of us know Michelle, who was on color, oh, I'm totally forgetting. It was a show we did. Pastor Michelle, she came on,
Oh
but she
yeah,
actually talked about that. Like
yeah.
she felt like the church in that one church that she served, she was hired for diversity, and
Hmm.
it was complete bullshit. And she was absolutely co-opted into the status quo, and shut down and silenced constantly. So,
Okay. A
yeah,
few other regulars. Of course, we have
colorism. There it is.
Sean in the
There's Sean.
building. Appreciate you chiming in, man. Your show that you guys are on were one of the best and most watched and most listened to shows.
Hmm.
So appreciate you chiming in, my brother. Do something, please. Yes, and not just do something for the sake of doing something, but do something that is actually rooted into something that is indigenous and that is meaningful for the people that's involved. So I'm with you on that,
Yeah.
Sean. And then we have Mike Robinson, who is black. He's like, I'm back. We're ready to go. Appreciate it, Mike. Last but not least, James, also one of our
Oh my
guests,
gosh. Yeah, yeah.
throwing
Indigenous
out
Peoples
love.
Day.
Yes, today is Indigenous People Day. So we should talk about that. So we got two topics. So listen,
Yeah.
listen, it's
Well, I
already
get,
set up. Already set up for what it's
how are we
going to
going to
look
talk
like.
about it? All right. Bring him
Already
in.
set up for what it's going to look like. All right. So then we have Annette. Okay, we got a lot of people chiming in now. Annette, looking forward to the
Hey,
show. We're going to
good to
give you
see you,
something
Annette.
good. We're going to give you something good, Annette. All right. So that being said, man, I think from a last week now standpoint, kind of showing some of that stuff. I mean, of course, we have the election coming up in the United States. A lot of banter
I'm
going back
skipping
and
last
forth.
week now. We got to get
Okay,
on
yeah.
this.
I didn't candidly. I did not watch the vice presidential debates purposely. Just I needed a break. So I wouldn't even have a whole lot of dialogue
Oh,
around that at this point right now. Anyway, because I don't.
Sarah had it
I'm not
on.
informed
Every
enough.
time I took my headphones off and saw it, I just screamed and like put my headphones back on. I just anyway, yeah. Thank God for the
So
fly. That's really all I got to say.
yeah, I don't even know what that means. Everybody keeps talking about the fly, and I don't really know what that
A
is.
fly landed on Pence's head partway through the debate. And
Okay, okay.
I mean, I want to make some
And
really personal attack comments right now, but I'm not going to.
yeah, I mean, why is that significant? I don't even understand.
It just it landed there and didn't move. Like just
Okay,
stayed
okay,
there.
okay, okay. I got you. I got you. Well, but
But
that actually
well,
ties it. Go ahead,
but
go ahead. What
I
were you
guess
gonna say?
actually though, it needs to be mentioned. Like Senator Harris's one of the things that I've seen resonated widely with people was that moment when she had to say, "I'm still speaking,"
Mm,
and just the reality. And this one I hear more from women. I hear it some from people of color, women of color especially, um, is getting run over constantly, especially by white men. And I've been guilty of it. Like just to be clear, I'm guilty of it so goddamn often. It's not even funny. I got to the point in some classes and some settings where I would keep a timer going so that I would time how long I spoke to make sure that I was tracking accurately how much space I was taking up in some of these places because it's shit I don't even realize. I just babble too much, like I'm doing right now.
got you.
But it's a thing, you know.
Yeah, yeah, we definitely have our things. Before our guests, and we have a few more regulars. So Angela chimed in. She said we really don't want to miss the importance of having a black woman on stage as a VP candidate.
Yep.
No question. That without listening to it is a big deal, and everybody
Yeah.
should be proud of the fact that we have that. We actually bringing difference, variety is a word I like to use in this
Yeah.
conversation. What it looks like into the executive level of leadership within our country. So all day celebrating that, all day, no question. So
Yeah.
that being said, we got to swing back around to MAGA again. That's the title of the show for those people who are actually chimed in. For those of you who may not know, MAGA Make America Great Again. We had a show, had my brother Eric on here, Pi as he's known in F3 Nation. Good man. I like him a lot. We have a lot of conversations, man. And I know that the first time that we had him on the show, a lot of feedback that I received was that the energy and the it was different than our normal show, right? The
Yep.
way that the space that we actually held was different, regardless of the topic, right? Because one of the things that's really adamant for us, and we've talked about this a lot, is we want to be able to hold this space and be consistent in holding it, right? Regardless of what the topic may be. So we felt it very important to make sure that we bring Eric back on. We're going to address part of the topic, but then this is going to be much more of a dialogue, not necessarily around that. I'm sure we'll touch on some of it because we probably just dropped 3 or 4 areas that we could talk about for hours. in our pre-show coming on, but I wanted to make sure that one, we bring him back on so we can have a dialogue around this. So Eric, I don't know if you're ready to chime in, but we have my man Eric. What's up, my brother?
Hello, gentlemen.
How you feeling, man?
Pretty good.
He is not on the screen.
He's not on the screen?
There he is.
Can you see me?
Am
Ready
I
to
on?
rock and roll. What's up,
There we go.
What's up, my man?
Great. I'm grateful for both of you having me back on again. I didn't seek to be on this show when I was first on, and this time, but Torian, great friend of mine, asked me to come on, and I'm always willing to explore, be open. And I think that's very important in today's world that we live in. So thank you.
No question. And you are welcome wherever I am holding space, my brother. So just so you know, put that out there for everybody to hear too. So that being said, man, so let's kind of circle back around to how we ended up in our well, not I can't even remember how we ended up on the last one actually, because I was kind of just like, oh,
no.
okay. That's
well, and I think I need to say this too. I take really seriously the fact that when I am silent, especially as a white man, it condones whatever's being said in the room. And I've been guilty of silence around racist and sexist and homophobic shit my entire life. And so I'm trying to learn how to be better about saying no to that kind of stuff. And there's a challenge here of that during our last show really interrupted how we were getting to heart space. And so I guess I just need to say out loud for myself that I'm not going to be challenging everything that is problematic here for me, because I want to have a better conversation. I want a deeper conversation. And that's where I have to state that intention. I'm probably going to have to mention it again, because this stuff is, well, I know how people get hurt when I don't do my job as somebody who sees shit. I mean, we use the catchphrase "silence is violence," and it's especially true from white males. I think white men have to be aware of our effect and how we walk in the world these days. But yeah, that also, well, I need it to not disrespect. So,
well, and I appreciate that comment. And here's something that's interesting to me. So the assumption. So it sounds like in what you're saying, the assumption around our conversation and the person that's on the show and the connection directly to racism.
Yeah.
Okay. And so I mean, yeah. Well, but see, the way I see it though is, and this is why I think this kind of space is important. You know, because we were talking about this on the pre-show, like we're talking and working with organizations for so long. Black people, women, marginalized, underrepresented communities were automatically put into categories without there being a, hey, let me engage with this person. I've experienced that in a lot of different ways in my life. And so it's one of the reasons why this is so important to me and why I've tried to always show up in this space. I agree with a lot of people, right? When it comes to religion, when it comes to politics, when it comes with the finance. But we talked about this before we got on the show. One of the things that I've really had to learn how to do is it's not about me being right in certain spaces, right? It depends on where I am. But specifically for this show, it's really about how am I showing up in a way in which I'm trying to learn more and then offer some type of nugget of new information to people who might be listening and or watching. So that's why I made that comment around it. I think it's kind of interesting with those. There can be synergy around some of those comments that you made. But I'm curious, Eric, what are you thinking, man? You've been silent for like 30 minutes.
I'm listening. I'm learning. There's a wide gap with the divisiveness that you see in social media. And I had a long conversation at a party Saturday night with a couple other gentlemen. We were sitting there, and great dialogue, great discussion. And we just kind of opened up. I didn't really know who's on the right, who's on the left. And it was my neighbor, her sister, just got engaged to her girlfriend. And they had a big tent, and we talked really deep conversation about, how do we reach each other in a better way, if you will? The divisiveness and really getting entrenched and putting your roots into the ground and just pointing the finger and yelling and spitting, it's not going to get us anywhere. It won't. So it was a long, thought out discussion, and we just talked about a lot of things. But I mean, I don't have any answers other than being a little bit more quiet and listening and speaking when you can make a point or maybe make change, if you will, rather than constant. Social media came up a lot in that discussion. That 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I talked about when my first job was a claims adjuster, and I had to call in for messages. I didn't have I picked up my phone and said, we didn't have these things. I had to call in. Royce smiles because he knows.
Oh, I remember that shit.
I had to call in to find a payphone, or if I was at a body shop, hey, can I borrow your phone? I got to call in for messages. So what were you fixated on? Well, it sure wasn't that phone with the social media. It was you thinking in your head about things or experiences, and you didn't have that constant somebody needling or jabbing or something that just irritates the hell out of you, right? So you look at that, and that was good. And MAGA, what does that stand for? That incites people. I understand it. I know that right away. Like I think we mentioned on the last program, it's like that red cape in front of a bull, even though I think bulls are colorblind. But MAGA, make America great again. And that's what I take from that slogan, is that those days when we weren't constantly, hate phrases, drumming that, on top of each other constantly. It was, hey, let's go back to a little more simplistic things. And that phone with the social media right there in front of us all the time, it's like fuel on the fire, and unfortunately, if you don't step away from it, you don't look at it, and I'm guilty of it. My wife, my family tells me all the time, put the phone down, you're on it all the time. I've got my beer group, I got friends, I've got my business, I've got a lot of things going on. So I do use it for a lot of things. That's kind of top of mind, thought there that I had on what we're discussing.
And I think that's absolutely true. Like, I deleted Facebook off my phone a few weeks ago because I was just like, I have to access it for work right now because our work is on Facebook. Like, we're broadcasting live to Facebook. I have to be able to promote stuff and do those kinds of things. But, so yeah, social media does not help in this. I also, though, like, I struggle with the notion that, well, yeah, yelling and spitting doesn't get us anywhere. But neither does the constant, like, silence and, like, this toxic silence around issues that are hurting people. And just because it doesn't hurt me, which, I mean, bluntly is because people still read me as a white man, doesn't mean it isn't hurting somebody. And that's the challenge that I see, is that until these things are yelling and spitting, we seem to not notice them. We don't care.
That's true. Yeah, it seems to get to a point, an inflection point with most things. It's like people have to feel it. You know what I mean? They have to feel it. Like, I think that a lot of times as human beings, we respond to incentives or consequences, really. And unless there's this
Pain is a great motivator.
hyper sense of awareness, like, hey, let me kind of step away from things a little bit and see. And so when we talk about this, I mean, I've told this story before, I believe on the show, but one of the things that I've appreciated with those people in my life who are friends, regardless of their political position, where they live or whatever, like my friends who identify as white, mostly outside of the country, they don't even know what's going on over here, but they call to check in on me just to make sure I'm good, right? And that's what when we talk about, hey, we're talking about systemic racism, we're talking about white supremacy, whether people agree with it or not. My thing is like, hey, there's a big group of people who believe that this is happening to them and it's very real for them or us, right?
Tens of millions of people.
Exactly.
Like,
so how do you create an environment where, as human beings, if we really care for each other, like, I don't really identify with, I don't even think this is going on, but how do I show up in a space like this so we can listen to it and then we could try to have some dialogue around it. But I would also say for me, the same thing exists for people who may not necessarily agree or come from that community too. I think I feel like I have a responsibility to be able to do that. Now, I will say this though, and I've thought about this a lot because a lot of people ask me, well, why is this so important to you? And I said, I feel very empowered as a human being. And that may be the difference. I don't know, and we can talk about that. But I very much have a mindset of either the world happens to me or I happen to it. I mean, that's really how I think. And maybe that's my ego speaking. And I do know that there have been some opportunities and things that I've been afforded because of what my parents, specifically my mom, has helped to set my sister and I up for. But that's kind of my root in how I show up. So I don't feel threatened when I have to hold space because I feel like I'm strong enough to do it. I mean, that may have sounded very egotistical, but it's not coming from an ego place when I say it. It really isn't.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts around that, gentlemen?
Just a quick comment on Royce's comment. I 100% agree with his statement that silence can be deadly and the wrong approach. But I think when we see when I say the spitting and the anger and the yelling of a point that is sometimes false or wrong, that's what I'm talking about. I mean, I agree. Passion's awesome. You see it on sports as a good analogy. A great coach who's passionate and pushing his team and great vocal, and he can have that rally speech at halftime, or that emotion. That's not really a good example of how to not be silent in what we're talking about. But when I see this anger sometimes and a false point being put forward, that's what I'm like, that's not good at all. That's not going to get us anywhere. And it can be left and it can be right. And I've seen it on both sides. But if there is a good movement to get behind, and there is racism, that's obvious. I think both sides agree there's racism. And you need to not be silent if you see it, if it's inherent somewhere. But there is a big disagreement on both sides on the word systemic racism, and how and when it is seen. You see some of these videos. Everyone's got that magical phone in their hand, and 5 minutes of video just is everywhere now. So someone sees, let's say a black man and another white man, and there's a confrontation. Immediately, it's like racism. That's what I'm getting from my observations. And I don't think we can just immediately, right away, boom, that's racism. What's the context? What was going on? What led up to that? And as a society, we need to not jump the gun and right away, boom, make a decision that something happened there and then label it. And then it's on media, it's on social media. And
there's a difference between assuming that an interaction or a conflict is rooted in race. There's a difference between assuming that and knowing that it's my responsibility as someone who has never worn black skin to ask the question, is race a factor here? A lot of my clients are women as a coach. And it's interesting because I'm hyper aware of sexism, especially in the workplace. I work with a lot of folks who are just complete badasses in the C-suite, and it's interesting because there's times when I'll hear the sexism and they don't see it until they turn that lens over to it, and they're like, "Oh shit, no, these key words were being said. These are very commonly used toward women." And then I listen to it as a man, and I'm like, I've never heard those things said at me.
Yeah.
And that's how we. So it begins the dialogue, but there is something about like having that as a lens, because there also, and as you're noting, there's been times when I've said, is this a sexist thing? And my client's like, no, it's not. This guy's just an asshole, something like that, this guy's just
I'm
just an idiot.
plenty of those, that's for sure.
Some people are just assholes. That's how it is. But
I've been an asshole at times too. I think we all have.
No, I have.
But so I think there's the challenge is there's a nuance there. It is our responsibility as someone, as especially those of us who have privilege, to have those factors on our radar, and we have to manually add them because it's not a pressure that we feel. I don't feel racism when I walk into a room. Okay, I say that. There have been times when I've walked in the room and I'm the only white guy in the room. And
what does that feel like? What does that feel like?
So first off, I gotta debunk the myth of, well, what would it be like for you? Because I'm still coming from a place of privilege. Because at the end of the day, I could walk out of that room. They couldn't stop me. They didn't have a racist police force to call to stop me from walking out of that room. And I can go back home to all my little white circles. You know what I mean? So
I just want to know what it felt like for you.
Oh, it was fucking unnerving. Like suddenly everything that I say, I'm speaking for all white people.
I've been there. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, oh God, I'm trying to remember it. But all right, my immediate reaction, I'm sweating.
Why?
And
why?
I don't know. Like that's the pressure that I immediately experienced. And it wasn't like it was hostile or anything like that. Like I know why I'm in spaces where I'm the only white guy. It's deliberate on my part, but it is painful sometimes to sit in those spaces and have to listen to dialogue that isn't my internal dialogue. You know what I mean?
And I'll come back to that situation, Royce. I've been in that situation too, and I 100% agree. Heart's pounding, you're sweating a little bit, hands get clammy. But going back to having the filter and understanding what's going on and is there racism? I agree with that. I think more to the point I was trying to make is an immediate knee-jerk reaction to an image that there's racism. And I'm not defending that this specific case or that case is not racism. That's not what I'm saying. I just have observed, especially social media and the 5-minute phone video. The phone's always out, right? And people are taking videos and then they post it to immediately tag that situation as racism right away. To me, that's horrible in the fact that, not that someone's getting called a racist, is you're dumbing down the word, you're watering it down. Now it has a lot less effect when the situation is racist. Racism does exist. So, I mean, that I'd say probably in the last probably 4, 5, 6 years, I've seen an intensified use of that, or probably since Obama to Trump. Let's just leave it at that. The current day, all the way back to when Obama came in, the intensity of using the word racist and racism has just caught on fire. And
what do you attribute?
Okay, I agree with Royce in that you need to root out the problems and you need to be an activist against racism. Absolutely. I don't want a racist country. I don't want my family to be racist. I don't want our community to be racist. Nobody does. Or I can't say nobody, but in my world.
So what do you attribute that rise to?
Social media, the 5-minute video, everybody. Well, that's probably not the cause or the root of it. I'll tell you what, I think one of them is the mainstream media. They are there to sell, and they want to be out in front and sell their ads. So they take these out of context situations and they blow them up. And it's weird how they all have the same chant on certain things. And it's constant all day, just fed in front of us through videos and social media. situations blogs, and it's just constant drumming in. And then there's a lot of people who won't get multiple narratives and find out, is there really truth to this, or is it just something that was thrown out and it's wrong? There was a video they had in one of the news channels. I don't know what it is, but it was from a foreign country. It wasn't even Missouri, where there was a lot of problem going on, and they found out, and then they pulled it down, and they had to do an apology for posting that video. And it's like, but people were taking that and saying, look at this going on. And the mainstream media is not anybody's friend right now, I don't think. I try to get multiple narratives, multiple sources, make my own decision by all that information. But I think that's one of the reasons, one of the sources to it. What else may there be? Stress. This whole COVID thing seems to have set a lot of issues on fire. And I just think it's people have shorter wicks, shorter fuses. They're easier to attack,
But could another part of those stresses be that they've experienced racism their whole life?
Absolutely. Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, and because I agree with you on all those things. Like I fundamentally believe that the real battle in life is between our ears. So no, I've said this to you personally. I think I've said it on the show. So yeah, we have to be mindful. And that's one of the things I ask people, talk to organizations. I ask people, where do you get your information from? Because that's important. But as far as the validity of it, and we talked a little bit about, we see it on videos, but how does it actually start to show up from a systemic standpoint? I mean, you know this. I do believe that it exists. I've experienced it pretty much for my whole life, right? Some places more than others, but I don't think that it's something that is very overt. And in fact, I would say a lot of people, I don't even think that they know that they're intentionally trying to do it. I think it's baked in. I think it's baked into a lot of different things.
There's the systemic. So I heard a question earlier about like systemic racism versus, I don't know, I guess I was hearing overt racism, a definition of overt racism.
Mm.
Like, Eric, is systemic racism a problem in your eyes in this country?
No. There are locations, areas, or
Where's a place that it's good to be a black man right now?
where is it good to be a black man?
Boy, I got a lot of jokes and stuff like that. I'm not going to say that.
Well, I mean, look at sports. It's great to be a black man compared to, athletic sports. I know, there's CEOs of companies. America's abundance of opportunities all around. I mean, opportunities in companies and sports.
If that opportunity is so great,
churches.
why are we hearing constantly from people of color that they do not have those opportunities? Like, at what point is it our job as white men to open our hearts to the possibility that they're experiencing something that we are not?
Well, that's a really broad and very broad question as far as who are you hearing this from? Because the conversation that I had Saturday night with the two other men that were there, the one gentleman, he owns, I think, a CrossFit gym, and he said he's just to give you a little background, he is a union employee and works for, I'm pretty sure it's ComEd. The other gentleman is an owner of a business out by my house in Will County, and the union worker said, "You know what, guys, I hear from a family member who lives on one of the sides of Joliet. It's probably, I think it was the southeast side of Joliet." And he said, from that group that my family belongs to is a lower socioeconomic area. And he says he hears what you just said, Royce, that a lot of, I think it was black men was the conversation, don't see the opportunity. So he at work was asking some gentlemen and their questions, because he's open and he wants to learn. And he said he asked like 9 black men, well, what do you think about not having opportunity. And every one of them told them, no, it's what you make it.
Is he white or black? The guy asking this
the
question.
guy at my table, it was two white males.
Yeah. So when we
He had a
ask
family member who's black in Joliet.
the challenge is that when we ask those questions, like so this number has varied over time, but over the last 10 years, this number has risen to near historic levels. The question of, have you experienced racism in the last day, in the last week, in the last month? And depending on whose polls you believe, and again, this is all self-reported, so yeah, you got to look at these numbers, but these numbers are ranging now between 70 and 80% of people of color who will say, yes, I experienced racism in the last day or the last week, like some level of racism in here. So when I, as a white man, ask that question of a person of color, if I'm going to ask that question, like, here's the challenge. If I don't believe that systemic racism is a thing and therefore I have privilege, then I can't ask this question and have an answer that is valid. Because if systemic racism is a thing, and if my privilege is a thing, then I have power in that situation, and it's going to skew the result. And so when we look at how people respond when it's white men asking the question, white women, or people of color asking the question, women of color, like the responses vary drastically according to who we think is asking the question. And that, again, only points to systemic racism. It points to privilege on the part of white men. So, like, it's fine to have anecdotal conversations about this. I know I hear from my black friends very clearly, and I am going to generalize here. Sorry to all of my friends who are people of color. Very clearly, Royce, you can't ask that question yet. You don't have the relationship to ask that question yet. That there's something about me as a white man asking those questions that the conversation can't actually be had authentically until a certain level of trust and relationship is established.
How do you establish that?
Oh man, I don't fucking know.
I can't say that. I can't say I necessarily agree with that though.
That's fair.
Personally, I'm not saying across the board. This is coming from someone who feels very empowered in how I show up every single day for whatever reason or how I got here. And I just don't think we can ever make any type of systemic change for anything that is systemic, or even if people don't believe that it isn't, unless we're able to hold space with people who are authentically trying to show up in the conversation to create better solutions. So then that's what we'll go back to my conversation with like Eric, or right, if there's a group of people, millions of people who are saying, listen, I'm in pain. This hurts a lot. And it's hurt for a long time. And it's hurt my grandfather. And it's hurt my great grandfather. And it's a real thing for me. When people who care about me say, that's not true. And I'm saying, no, it's true for me, man. No, that's not true. That's where it's a bit of a dissonance for me, because it's like, but I'm telling you it is. And there's a lot of people who are saying that it is. So if we really are talking about being part of the solution, then people should show up to at least start with a dialogue that is open to say, how and why is this relevant for you? But see, I also don't see it as a personal attack, right? So I don't look at every white man and say, oh, he's a racist, I can't talk to him. Or I know he hates me, or I know he's looking at me, or I don't know, because I got a wide nose. Because honestly, I really don't care, right? But to me, it's the power dynamic that could go along with it. And I said this on our show before. When I think of white or whiteness, I think of control, which is a neutral term for me. It's the majority of resources that are controlled in this country and really the world are controlled by white men. It's factual, right? For whatever reason, how we got there. So how does that affect every other aspect of life, financially and economics, which I think is at the base of everything? Because if I can't eat, I don't really care about other stuff because I need to be able to feed myself and my family. And then how does that bleed into certain systems where things exist and they don't exist? Because, I don't necessarily think that I agree with you. The media is not anybody's friend but the shareholders of that company. And I say that as a joke, but it's true. I don't care what channel you watch. You have to understand that they have an agenda and the producers want you to feel a certain way, right? If you watch um, Brother Ben X or you watch Ben Shapiro, there are producers that are trying to add to their bottom line. So they want to reaffirm things that you already think. So I look at everything with a grain of salt because I look at it from that way and I understand that they're trying to lead me in a certain direction. But from a human standpoint, I do think that people should show up in that way to at least have the dialogue. And I think that's where we can actually start to move forward. So I don't want to take too much of this, but I'm curious, Eric, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I totally understand what Torian's saying. I totally understand what Royce is saying. I'm sorry to speak to you as your second person, but that's how I'm trying to.
I mean, I don't understand what Royce is saying half the time, so whatever.
Yeah, what I struggle with is the word systemic, because what you're
Okay.
talking about is the system.
Hmm.
And conversations and talking individually and talking to people, that's not going to change the system, in my opinion, because I'm thinking of it as a machine, and maybe I'm looking at it wrong. Okay. Systemic means that the entire United States, the system, is racist. And I 100% disagree with that. Now, is there heavy pockets of areas that, and you were, Torian, you mentioned something about, hey, I've talked to, this person, and there's a lot of these people who are saying this. Okay, I can see that. I understand those are human beings, but a system should be, it should be a vacuum. It shouldn't have a color filter. And that's where I struggle with this whole, I think it's another one of these words that are just drummed into everybody that's false, that's wrong. It's not a systemic racist nation. There are nations that didn't allow, and at one time the United States, a race not to participate. And that is racist. But today things are much different. And again, I keep repeating that there are pockets and problems, but that's not what the system is made to do. That is a problem and a
How big does a problem have to be bigger than a pocket?
I graduated with a math degree, so I see where you're going with the logic and ad infinitum, right? If it goes all the way down. So yeah, I think racism is a terrible situation, and you need one case to be bad. Are you trying to ask me when is it systemic? When is it ingrained in a society?
I mean, yeah, because that's the issue. Like I know that it shows up differently in different contexts, right? Absolutely. And when we look at polling stations, it's one way to look at racism, right? And we see very consistently across large swaths of the country, but it does often tend to be regional. Okay. We'll see that for every 100,000 people in this area, there are one voting station. For every 100,000 people in this county, there are 13. Well, this is a systemic issue because it's a basic thing around who's voting. And then when you find out that the county where it's 1 to 100, 1 to 100,000, it is predominantly people of color, whether one marginalized population or another, whether it's El Salvadorian or Cubans or African Americans. When you find out that that's the distribution difference, the identifiable factor isn't even class necessarily. Sometimes it's race. How do we not look at that and say this is systemic racism? And again, I return to the predominance of the experience of people of color when they self-report and say, I've experienced racism within the last X amount of time. It's upwards around 70 or 80% right now. And that's like, that again, sounds statistically important to me.
Yeah, that's way too many. That's obvious. I mean, again, I go back to, one situation is bad. So you don't need 10 or 100 or a million. I'm not sure about the voting polls. I've never seen that study. I do vote. I have family members who are judges. I did poll watching one time as a favor to a friend who was very involved politically, and I don't know if it's because if you get into politics, there are some things that are set up, and these people, it's like a religion to them. Okay, the pollsters and the committeemen and the guys who are precinct. I was a precinct guy one time. I'm like, you know what? I don't have a passion for this. I'm not doing it anymore. There are guys. It's like a religion to them. They get up early in the morning. They're ready to go, and maybe and the way things are set up, that there's 100 years of ingrained better efficiency there. I don't see the racism, Royce. I'm sorry, I don't follow it. And if there's articles or a book written on that, I would love to read them and understand that. But I'm not just going to go on that alone. That's racist. I don't think that's racist.
So the most recent book I read that actually articulated that and looked at Florida was Ibram X. Kendi's How to Be an Anti-Racist.
Okay. How to be anti-racist.
I
I just Google it.
And I recommend that book partially because it's very recently written, so it has statistics that are very. His science was solid on that part. Anyway, okay. I'm also conscious of time. We are not going to go over time today.
We're not going to go over time.
Not going to do it.
I think this is a good time to kind of lead off with, and I like to lead off with something that's positive and that is solutions driven. Right. My identity is not stuck in the struggle or in survival. It's stuck in how do we actually make things better for tomorrow. So my question to you all would be, so how do we show up better so we can thwart, we agree that racism exists. So I'll just throw racism out there. How do we show up better? It's the three of us, it's people, so that we can make a dent into racism in the United States going forward. And I'll start, if you don't mind. I'll give you guys time to think a little bit, but for me, everything is about intentionality. And so I'll use the example that I have when it comes to sexism and misogyny and paternity, if you will. I am very conscious and highly aware of that there are certain things and certain opportunities that have happened to me, good and bad, that I may not be aware of, that have affected me and that may have marginalized women in environments that I've been in. And so I try to be, not try, I am hyper vigilant in asking questions as to where women are, how they feel about certain things, and making sure that I'm getting feedback that's not directly connected to what I already think. Of course, I don't always get this right. Tons of mistakes for sure. But for the most part, I have had really good feedback on that, and I'm trying to make sure that not only I do it, but I'm modeling it for other people. So this is the way that I try to show up on a daily basis around that. And so I would say the same thing for racism. Like the first thing that I would do for anyone is just check the people who you're around most of the time. I mean, even for me, like I have Eric's a brother of mine, Royce, you're a brother of mine. I mean, I'm at my brother's house right now. He's black. You guys are white. I mean, still my people, right? You know what I mean? But I make it very intentional to have a variety of of formative experiences that are very different from where I come from. For me, I think that gives us an opportunity to really put more tools in our identity toolbox. So that's my answer into how we can go forward and actually thwart racism. So I'll let either one of you all go next.
I'll go. I'll let Royce finish up. I try to live the best life that I can individually. And one thing I've observed is I don't think we can attack a problem as a word or change society in general. I firmly, strongly believe that if, just like F3, Torian, I get right, I then can lead right. I can be a better father, a better husband, a better house, and then a better community. And if we don't start by changing ourselves, and I think I said this at the table Saturday night, on a 1 to 10, I hope I'm a 6, a 6.5. I strive to get better, but the more mature and older I get, I find out that, I don't know everything. There are much better improvements that I can make. So I think as a society, but we need more traditional families. This is what I believe. I'm not pushing this on anyone here. We need more traditional families, strong male figures in our lives, and church and community, less government. Those things, if you are leading a moral and right life, then you'll be able to lead. If you have children or friends, family, you'll lead right, and then you'll live right, and then leave a legacy. Just as F3, we in Q Source talk about on a weekly basis. So, I'll leave it at that. Individually, to me, is the strongest thing that is lacking today. It's more just shouting in a group and trying to change everybody at once, and it's not going to happen. You're up, Royce.
I got.
Forget everything I said. You talk about how you can make change.
I mean, when I hear traditional marriage, I assume that I still owe my mother-in-law 8 cows and 32 sheep. Like
that's me personally. I just went to an engagement party Saturday night. I told you, where my neighbor's sister was getting engaged to her girlfriend. Dude, I am not gonna force anyone to follow what I do, but I think it's fair here to end, as Torian said, on how can we make change? If you and I want to have a debate on my beliefs, my faith, my religion, let's do it.
No, it's actually calling it traditional marriage that bothers me, because it's not.
We can have a show on that. We can have a whole show on that.
But yeah, exactly, because the whole point here, right, is to let people. Cause this is coming from a guy who's not married, who doesn't have any children, who has no religion, right? Like I don't believe in any of that stuff, to be honest with you. So it doesn't mean I can't hear it and receive it. It's just where I am right now. I haven't seen any of those institutions do really well by the masses of people over a long period of time.
It reinforces a norm that cuts me off from myself, and that hurts and it sucks. And it's a norm that made it so that even when I was experimenting with other men as a young person, I did not recognize that I was bisexual or pansexual, because this shit is so pervasive that I couldn't even believe that I might be a valid human being if I loved another man. So yeah, I have responses to this stuff. So, okay. And you're right. That's a whole nother show. So we're trying to wrap this one up. Okay. So my brain circled around the question of what's it like to be the only white guy in the room. And I finally had some little revelation that actually has to do with this. So I got to roll with it. There's also the pressure when I'm the white guy in the room to code switch.
I'm familiar with code switching.
Yeah. I figured you would be. But there's something problematic about it when I do it. And I only say that having done code switching enough to be like, I've fucked it up majorly. and it's because of the propensity, because of the power dynamic or privilege or something, that when I code switch, I appropriate somebody else's culture. And so it is this constant, for me, a communication struggle, especially because I'm very influenced by who I hang out with. I want to fit in, probably too much. And so when Torian and I end a phone call and he's like, peace, right? Like there's that part of me that wants to say peace. And it's this weird double bind on it for me, because it is a way that is absolutely valid to end a conversation, but I associate it with the Black community. And so my brain can't figure out if it's authentic to me or not. That's the double bind that I end up in. And it's really good for me. And that leads to my next question is, just because it's uncomfortable doesn't mean it's not important or good for me. In fact, those kinds of spaces, I have to seek them out. I don't naturally end up in rooms where I'm the only white guy or a white person or the only man. I have to intentionally seek spaces where I'm the only white person or the only man or the only guy that's married to a woman. I have to intentionally seek those spaces out. Um, and that says something, but it also, like, that's my way forward, is I have to keep being in those uncomfortable places. I have to keep stocking my bookshelf with authors that don't look like me in one respect or another, or don't live like me in one respect or another. Because I have to assume that they are valid human beings, and therefore they have something important to teach me about my own humanity. But I got to go out of the way to do it, because everything on my fucking Amazon stream is white people. Everything on my book recommendation list is white, well, specifically white men typically. So everything in my nerd community is white men. So it takes a lot. I'm not like glorifying the work or anything. I'm saying it takes discipline and effort to stay the course on this stuff. So that's my thing.
So you're saying go out and seek those different spaces
I ain't gonna tell
outside of the
anybody
status
else
quo.
what to do. This is what I do.
No, this is, but that's the question though. How do we show up? How do we show up individually? That's the question. How we
Yeah.
want to cap off. So okay, that's good, man. I appreciate it. So we're going to continue this discussion. So all of our listeners, viewers, we're going to be putting a lot of this stuff behind some walls in it.
We have announcements too.
Yeah, go ahead and drop that off. Go ahead and drop
Okay.
that off, man. And we'll shut it down.
All right. So yeah, there's a bunch of changes, including next week. So last week, if you guys saw our show, Teresa came on the show, and she's going to join our team as a partner. She brings huge artistic skills to the team. She also brings a much needed producing hat to the team. So that Torian isn't having to try to manage, for example, the comments that none of us can see right now.
Well, I got one. I got one. So go ahead. Finish up.
Yeah. So just I couldn't be more excited. So when we'll tag her on one of these or whatever, but reach out to Teresa and tell her hi and how excited we are about having her join. The other thing, I feel like we have to acknowledge TL's big announcement last week.
Go ahead, do your thing, man.
Oh, okay.
You got it.
So those of you who've watched the show, back on a fatherhood episode, we had a gentleman named TL, who's, a huge friend of the show. He's had me on his show. Torian's on his show constantly. He's come on my podcast. Like, anyway, big, happy, love family. He ended his first season bringing back guests and saying hi to everybody, and announced that he's got some major changes upcoming. I don't know what they are. Like, it sounds like he may have a deal in the works, so I'm excited for him. Sounds like he's changing some things up for that show, but he's on break right now. So for those of you who are behind on the Frontline Stereo podcast, go catch it. Listen, catch up on all the old episodes now, because major changes are coming to that. So we're excited for TL.
Nice. Absolutely. We definitely want to round that out. Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate that. 2 quick comments from our listeners. So Jonathan Mann, amazing human being. We actually, company Go Formative, check it out. K through 12, a part of the advisory board and actually an investor. Quick little shout out there. But he asked a question: how do we get more people and organizations focused on intent before acting? Jonathan, my man, that is a great question. I think that's something that everybody should kind of sit on and kind of think about as they're listening to this. And last but not least, from my people, Donna Morton up in Canada. I think she's back up in Canada, but she says she appreciates the conversation, man. This allows us all to be more authentic in our lives and bodies. I am grateful. So that is what we want to leave this show off with, because that is the kind of energy. I don't want to speak for other people, but for Torian Richardson, I want to be putting out into the world. And I think we're able to do that, man. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it coming back around. We're going to do our after party. And to all our listeners and viewers, peace. We'll see you next week.
Thank you, man.
All right, man.
Thanks,
Appreciate it.
audience.
Peace. All right.
Thank you.